Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. The Islamic State, earlier known as the ISIS, has just completed 1 year since the establishment of its Caliphate. It is today the world's richest terrorist group with a powerful army controlling a large mass of land and has enough sources of funding on a regular basis to continue with its acts of terror across the world, as we noticed recently with 4 concentrated attacks in 4 different parts of the world.
June 2015. 3 continents, 4 bloody carnages. In Kuwait, 25 worshippers killed, over 200 injured in an attack on a Shia mosque. In Tunisia, 37 people killed in a suicide attack. In Lyon, France, a foiled attack to detonate gas cylinders at an industrial gas factory. And in a simultaneous attack on Egyptian military checkpoints, killing more than 16 Egyptian soldiers and injuring 30 others. All these attacks were the handiwork of one group, the Islamic State, which has now entered its 2nd year since the declaration of its Caliphate. With over 30,000 hardened jihadist fighters drawn from nearly 100 countries, this Sharia law-based Islamic Caliphate reigns over 8 million people on a landmass the size of the UK. It is the richest terrorist group in history, generating $3 to $5 million a day from oil sales in the black market, loot from plundered banks, sale of smuggled antiques and the ransom money from kidnapped victims, apart from the donations from the Sunni fundamentalist regimes and some wealthy patrons. And the cadre of the ISIS continues to grow, despite America's efforts to eliminate it. Many of its recruits come not only from the youth of repressed Arab societies, but also from Central, South and Southeast Asia, where it eventually aims at establishing a province on some island in the South China Sea. But its immediate impact could be on Afghanistan and Pakistan, countries already torn by insurgency and terrorism, where many Islamic State fighters are returning, bringing with them its ideology and know-how of using murderous terrorism, a fact that India mustn't ignore anymore.
One of the biggest concerns to the international community is that despite the bombings of the Islamic State and their militant groups, and the efforts to control its expansion, they continue to draw recruits from all parts of the world. We are going to look at the subject of the Islamic State and its future and its agenda with 2 experts on the subject. I have with me Dr. Sriram Cholia, the Dean of the Jindal School of International Affairs, and our expert from the past who's back with us again, Dr. Wail Awad, the West Asian expert and the South Asia Bureau Chief of SANA. Dr. Sriram, Islamic State continues to draw militants from various countries. The largest, I'm told, is the consignment they get from Central Asian countries, where the Prime Minister of India is soon due to visit, and it's a subject that the Prime Minister is probably going to bring up quite seriously with many other Central Asian countries. But its recruitment base is beyond the Arab world, though you've written to say that a large number of disgruntled youth from the Arab world continue to join the ISIS. They get recruits from as far away as Southeast Asia. They get apparently a very large number even from Australia. What's your view, and how do you see that it has not been able to impact sufficiently on India?
Well, the global pattern of recruitment is not new in the sense Al-Qaeda also had operatives across dozens of countries. But what is interesting is that the Islamic State has a territorial concept of power, while Al-Qaeda used to be much looser. It was purely a terrorist organization. Islamic State, ISIS wants people to flock to Iraq and Syria and then also to launch attacks in their home countries. So therefore, it's a kind of a double-edged sword, where on one hand, they want to overthrow what they consider to be apostates, Shia regimes in Iraq and Syria. But on the other hand, they also want to foment a kind of a worldwide movement playing on the notion of the Ummah, or the brotherhood of all the Muslims across the world, especially Sunni Muslims, which is their main constituency.
Dr. Awad, it is said that the Islamic State has spelt out a 5-year plan. And in its 5-year plan, they want to have a presence from Andalusia in Spain to Khorasan in China. And in all that, they are looking at essentially challenging the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 that really had established the West Asian countries, and you are a West Asian, in the kind of borders system of countries that existed, but they now see an Islamic Caliphate which is borderless. What's your view?
Well, I agree with you with your presentation. Actually, to start with, that the Sykes-Picot have started 100 years back, there is another new Sykes-Picot which is going to take place in the modern 21st century, because there are tendency now of reshaping the West Asia or the Middle East and the Northern African state. Therefore, that's why you see the spread of terrorism has been from the Tora Bora up to Morocco, or even to Australia, or to Khorasan. So the reason why I am trying to put on these issues is very simple, because when they created Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, it was the mini project. This is the larger global project here, and here you can see the IS have already created training places for them in Libya, inside Syria and Iraq, and all these recruitment mercenaries have been going back home, and they are having what is known as the independent branches. That means you have already been trained on the killing, on raping, and also in explosions, and you are able to recruit locally. Therefore, it's very easy for this group to act independently from the center of the resources, and that's why we can see this happening. I was in France, I was in London just last week, and I have seen all these things happening in Morocco, in Tunisia, and in Paris, in France. And these two incidents is an opening and awakening call for the world, and for these two major countries, which has played a major role in shaping the Sykes-Picot Agreement and also in reshaping the Sykes-Picot, not taking in consideration the interests of the public and the European cause, because the Islamophobia has been created, and that is going to have the ramification on the future of Europe as well.
Dr. Shriram, it is said that the largest number of recruits that the ISIS or the Islamic State will continue to target would be from Asia, because Asia provides 1/3 of the Muslim population or more, particularly in Southeast Asia, where a large number of Muslims reside. But equally important for the world is the fact that, as you've written, that a large number of disgruntled Arab youth tend to be veering more and more towards the Islamic State as a response to the very rigidly controlled societies that they operate in. So they would rather like to go with something which also offers them, assumably, a holy mission as compared to a life of restriction which they live in the Arab world, and they see that their rulers are far from inspiring. Do you agree with this thesis?
Absolutely. Political frustration and restrictions are the core, behind the people wanting to join terrorist organizations. It's been proven that there's no link between poverty and terrorism. You often find highly motivated terrorists who are very well off and highly educated, right? So it goes back to the point that if they feel powerless in these kinds of authoritarian regimes, the entire Middle East, despite the brief Arab Spring, remains mired in that kind of regime type. And therefore, it becomes fertile ground for young people to seek salvation in this, mythical being that's been created out there in the Levant, and which promises to keep spreading and to bring back the glories of, Harun al-Rashid and of Baghdad, where, so this is where I think it's a dream. In many ways, they're selling a dream, but there are many takers for it. As is seen, 100 countries is not a small number. We didn't see that much multinational character even in the anti-Soviet jihad in Afghanistan in the 1980s. So this is something qualitatively bigger, and it plays upon the anxieties and the fears and the political marginalization of young people in these regions.
Dr. Awad, it is said that the competition between the two giants in the Islamic Arab world, Saudi Arabia and Iran, is also a central point in how the ISIS has emerged and consolidated its gains, because it is being propped up by certain Sunni Arab countries as well as certain other financial patrons. It has other sources of income, from $3 to $5 million worth of oil sales from captured oil field, smuggled goods being sold, kidnapping ransom money that they are making. But what do you make of this sectarian strife in the Arab world, which is causing all sorts of problems, from the ongoing 4-year plus long campaign in Syria, to the emergence of the ISIS, to Iraq being in the shambles, and now Yemen?
Well, I'm not surprised to see the Saudis linked to this crisis. In fact, if you go by the survey in the Saudi public opinion, you will find out that 93% of the people in Saudi Arabia still believe that what Daesh is doing or IS is doing is legitimate and it is part of the Quran. Then I think even 53% of the population in Turkey still believe that these are doing the legitimate things. I think there is a problem within our understanding of religion, of Islam, we have to address. And this is a worrisome, because if you have the maximum number of Daesh, 12,000 Turkish now are in IS. You have 18,000 Saudis are in IS. The majority of the suicidal bombers, even in Kuwait, took place is a Saudi national. American CIA have said during the invasion of Iraq that the 45 to 50% of the suicide bombers are Saudi Arabia. I think we have an issue to address here. And this major issue is to see that those who support these kind of radical and extremisms, whether it is in imams in the mosque, whether it is the clergy traveling around the world, whether funding the mosques and the masjids all over the world, there is an issue we have to address, because there the danger lies. You have already touched the point that these are the danger of allowing the radicals to spread through the venom, through the sermon of their teaching in those parts of the world, and taking advantage of the malpractice and the lack of democracy in the Arab world, which all these groups have grown up, whether it's in the Arab world. While you see in Europe, it is the isolation and the minority difficulty to integrate with the society have led to this. So when you're sending a clergy to a mosque existed in those areas and start recruiting people, then it is not a simple phenomenon has been created. It is a phenomenon supported by intelligence agencies, supported by countries, which has to be addressed. And we're not serious about fighting terrorism. If you are serious globally to fight against terrorism, you address what is behind IS and who is also supporting, what are the route of supply to them.
Interesting points. We will be back after a break to look at how the world can still retrieve lost ground from the IS, how the IS and its expansion can be challenged, and equally importantly, what challenges it poses for India and what India should prepare for.